Hey guys, today we're talking all about how do you pay for stuff in the UK. Now I know this seems like kind of pointless, but some countries are actually quite different. So this is everything you need to know about how to buy stuff when you live in the UK. So first and foremost, we are talking about bills. So how do you typically pay for bills as an expat in the UK? So these are things like rent, electricity, water, gas, internet. Typically, bills are paid monthly. These are things that you need to survive. Now, all of these bills are direct debits or scheduled payments, so I never need to think about them and I never miss them either. They're just sort of automatic electronic payments for all of these bill type things. Now, it can be really overwhelming to first get set up in your flat and get all of these bills like in your name and with the right account and all that kind of stuff. But once you set them up either with a direct debit or a scheduled payment, then you really don't have to stress about it. Because once you've set it up once, then you're good to go. I will say though, I did live in a property once that had like a prepaid electricity meter. And some properties have this where perhaps they are worried that you won't pay your electricity bill by the time it is due. The flat that I moved into already had this system, so don't take it too personally, but it is actually quite annoying in that you would have like a key that you would associate with your property. You'd go to typically a convenience store and you would put electricity money onto this key, and then you would like load it into the meter for the property. Basically, you are prepaying for electricity, and then when it's getting low, you'd have to do it again. I think those are fairly rare. That was only the first property I lived in. All the rest of them has been just like your traditional regular monthly bills, and they are all done electronically. Next up, let's talk about groceries. So groceries and food shopping is obviously pretty important, and there are a variety of different ways that you can do this. Now, I buy my groceries from a variety of different supermarkets, and all of them I use contactless. Originally, I would use my debit card, so you tap the payment till thing with your debit card, contactless for payment for all my groceries. In probably the last year or two, I've actually switched entirely to paying with my phone. So I use the contactless Apple Pay feature on my iPhone at every grocery store, and I've never had a problem. Now, typically, there are two ways to check out at a grocery store. There's like the regular till with somebody like scanning all your items, and then there are like the self-checkout kiosks. And typically, they should both accept contactless or card payment or cash. One thing to keep in mind is that some grocery stores, there'll be like 2 rows of self-checkouts. So maybe one row is cash and contactless, and maybe the other row is just contactless. So if you only have one or the other, just make sure you go to the right kiosk. But typically, as someone who I never ever use cash anymore, I've never had a problem. There's been one instance when I went to the grocery store and their internet, like Wi-Fi, everything was down, so they couldn't accept contactless or card payment. That was one time, and it was a random event. Now, if you go grocery shopping or food shopping at a really tiny shop, like a family-run grocery store kind of thing, like really, really small, that may be hit or miss whether they will take contactless. Some of those places are cash only. But typically when you do a grocery shop, you do your big food shop, as the Brits say, you should be allowed to use cash or card payment. And when I say card, I also mean like contactless card payment. Next up, we have travel and transportation. Now, there are loads of different ways to get around the UK, which is fabulous, and they all have their own little quirks. So first up, we have train. Now, buying train tickets, I always buy them online, so I pay for them online, but typically train stations should either have a like ticket clerk or a kiosk, and both of them should accept card payments or cash. Next up, we have the bus. Now, in recent years, they have really modernized the buses here in the UK for a lot of different regions, but it will depend on what bus service you use and where in the country you are. Previously, you had to buy your bus ticket on the bus and you had to use cash. And typically, the bus driver does not have like a float of change. So they really want you to buy your ticket with cash using almost like perfect cash, that you don't need any change. Which honestly, as an expat who doesn't know offhand which coin is what, was very stressful. Nowadays, and for a lot of regions in the UK, you can do contactless payment, which makes it so much simpler. So for example, recently I took the bus. So I have the bus app for that particular provider on my phone. I went in and I plugged in where I was going and when I wanted to get off, and I bought a ticket through their app and I paid for it with my phone. Then when I board the bus, I can show the driver my ticket, and I'm good to go. Some buses even have like a QR code reader. So rather than showing it to the driver, you put it through the little reader thing and then that's it. But typically when I use the bus, it is done completely with my phone. For the more modernized buses, they will also have a like tap payment reader. So if you needed to buy a ticket on the bus and you say to the driver, you know, I need an adult return to this location, and they say, oh, it'll be £4, they typically will have that reader where you can either tap your phone or you can tap your payment card. I still see people buying tickets with cash though, so it's very dependent on the person. But for me, I try to do all of it through my phone, all of it through an app, pay for it ahead of time, so there's like no stress, no worries, and I just have to show the driver my ticket. Next up, when it comes to the London Underground or the Tube, contactless payment is the way to go. London transportation is great in that it has been contactless for years. Pretty much 99% of transport in London, you do not need cash, which is fabulous. So when you use the Underground, you tap in to get through the barriers to get onto the tube, and then you will tap out to get out through the barriers to get out like into the city. And that can either be done with a debit card or with your, Apple Pay on your phone, or if you have a Oyster card, that is a smart card, you're tapping in and you are tapping out. If you only have cash, you will have to preemptively buy a particular ticket because the turnstiles at the tube do not you can't buy tickets through them. You have to do that before in the station, take your little ticket, and then go through the reader. And then you would use that ticket to then get out as well. But really the name of the game when it comes to anything in London is contactless. Next up, we have taxis. So taxis can be either or. Some taxis will only want cash. Some taxis will want contactless. Some taxis will have their own app, so you can book the taxi and the payment through your phone, which is wonderful. Just make sure that when you get into the taxi, you ask the driver if it's cash or card, because you don't want to end up at your destination and they only accept cash while you only have card. So just make sure to ask before you get started. When it comes to Ubers are all done through the app, which is fabulous. And then you of course pay for your journey through your phone. Now, if you have a car when in the UK, now there are loads of costs associated with having a car, but all of my car insurance and my car tax and all that kind of stuff is done electronically. When it comes to gas or petrol, as the Brits will say, the pumps can kind of be hit or miss. Some pumps will let you pay by card at the pump, which is great. Some pumps, you will use them and then you will need to go into the convenience store gas station building, tell them which pump is yours, and then pay for it that way. And when you go in, you could then pay by card or with cash. Now, when it comes to sort of everyday purchases, these can be things like going out to dinner at a restaurant, maybe a cafe or a pub, maybe a hair salon, getting your hair cut, or takeaway, getting a Chinese. Typically, they should be able to offer you both types of payment. However, make sure to check, particularly with the smaller places. That's the only time you're kind of gonna get messed up is if you go to, say, a really small like Indian takeaway place and they won't accept card. But typically most places should be able to accept both. Now, how do you get cash out if you need it? So in Canada, in the US, we would call them ATMs, but here the Brits typically call it a cash point. And they should be around. Just gonna have to keep your eyes open. Sometimes you miss them if you're not looking for them, but they should be around places like banks, maybe the post office, maybe a really sort of town center location, like a really popular area, and they will be called cash points, but they look just like a regular ATM for any Americans or Canadians. Just make sure before you use it that it is a cash point that does not charge any fees. Sometimes you can find some sketchy cash points that charge you to take out your money. I wouldn't use them unless you're absolutely desperate. Have a look at, a local bank, a post office, a grocery store. They should have a cash point that has no fees. And to be honest, the last time I took cash out was I was going to a town festival, and there's gonna be like a bunch of food trucks and vendors and stalls and all that kind of stuff. And I thought, surely this is when I'm gonna need cash. And I ended up using contactless payment that entire day. So life here in the UK is really moving towards contactless. There are few and far between situations where you can only use cash. Now, is there a limit for contactless payment? Currently in the UK, that's actually only just recently increased. It used to be there's a limit of like £30 where you could tap for payment. Now it's up to £100. So even if I go out to dinner and I'm buying dinner for a bunch of my friends and it ends up being, a bit expensive, I can still tap for payment at the end of the night as long as it is under £100. From one expat to another, I would recommend having some cash on hand just in case, like having £20 in your wallet just in case. But really, the day-to-day stuff for me for the last really 7 years I've been in the UK has really been contactless payment. So I'll either use my phone, I'll use my debit card. I very, very rarely need cash, but it is still helpful to have some around just in case. If you have any questions, please leave a comment down below. If you're still learning about life here in the UK, make sure to check out this video where I talk about everything you need to know about public transport. But until then, I'll see you in the next one.